as you heard, we welcome you this afternoon to the Connected and Autonomous Vehicles webinar sponsored by the I-95 Corridor Coalition. It is a webinar of the working group. We're happy to have you join us today. I am Joanna Riegel from KMJ Consulting, and we're supporting the I-95 Corridor Coalition. We're happy that you could join into the webcast. If you have any issues, please reach out to Justin. He's available at 484-557-5009. This is a virtual meeting experience, and so we'd like to remind you just to keep your lines muted when you are not speaking, and please don't place your call on hold. This web meeting is being recorded, and the materials will be made available to the participants following the meeting. There are a couple of ways that you'll be able to make comments and ask questions, and we're encouraging everyone to participate. You can do that verbally at the end of each presentation you'll be hearing today, or in the chat box. Again, we ask that you just keep your line muted when you're not asking a question. And if you could just give us your name at least the first time when you're asking a question, that's very helpful. I know, I sound like a broken record, but it's true. When we hear all that background noise, we may have to stop the meeting just to kind of make sure that everyone can hear. So if you can just kind of keep your phone muted, we greatly appreciate it. And that's your computer, too. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Trish Hendren, the Executive Director of the I-95 Corridor Coalition.
Great. Thank you, Joanna. And thanks, everyone, for spending your afternoon with us, talking about a topic that is on the forefront of all of our minds and definitely our conversations. And just a special thanks I want to give to the I-95 Connected Autonomous Vehicle Working Group co-chairs. That is a mouthful. Roger Cohen and Renika Day, Rowan Bennett, Raj Panalori, Daniel Sullivan, and Herb Thompson. I guess that's a little bit in alphabetical order. And what we wanted to do today was hear from two invited guests about topics that were raised during our workshop last December. And then we want to hear from you, hear from each other as far as what we have been up to so far in 2018. This is a very fast-moving topic, so one of the roles that we heard that our members want the coalition to fill is to provide an opportunity to have some dialogue across agencies and to update each other on what we're doing. So we want to make sure we have that opportunity today. And then we're going to conclude with a couple of next steps as far as for this group. You guys, I think, know you are officially our Connected Autonomous Vehicle Working Group that we gave birth to back in December at our workshop. So I'm going to move forward on the next slide here. Yep, that's working great. So our guests here today are Robert Passmore, and he's here to share perspectives from insurance providers, and we also will be hearing from Fred Payne, who will talk about taking the concept of autonomous shuttles and making it a reality. So very grateful for both of them for being here today. As far as the participants, I want everyone to take a minute and look at this list. Hopefully you see your name here. So we're about 50 plus people who had registered for today's webinar. If you do not see your name on this list, please put your name into the chat box just so we can make sure that we send you information and notes from today's webinar. And while you're looking at your name, I want to highlight the members that we're going to be hearing from later in the round robin. So we're going to hear from Massachusetts, from Daniel Sullivan, Connecticut. Looks like Peter is on, so we'll hear from him. New Hampshire and Rhode Island, Vermont, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and AMPO. So Eileen Singleton, will be talking about the AMPO working group. So hopefully that's exciting, everyone, to stay with us until 3 o'clock. That's when we'll wrap up the webinar. And again, hopefully that gives people enough time to check for their name and send us a message in the chat box if you don't see your name there. So kind of been over what we're going to cover in the next hour and a half. So I will dive into in a minute here just a couple of thoughts on our workshop from last December. Then we'll hear from Robert, Fred, and then we'll do the round robin with the agencies. We have a lot to cover, so we will at times gently encourage people to move on, and as we identify topics that need additional more in-depth discussion, we will, of course, make sure that we can do that. So what I wanted to do for the next, just for another minute, is just to encourage everyone to review the report from our December workshop. And I won't ask folks if they have to confess whether or not they did their homework and read the report before this meeting, but hopefully we will, as a result of some of these slides, it will encourage folks to rush and look at the report and share it with your peers. And I do want to thank Sue Catlett for her comments that she recently sent. So we're going to declare this report final at the end of this webinar unless you guys send us a message saying, oh, we have some comments. So that's kind of the idea for today, is to encourage folks to look at this. So what did we do in our workshop in December? So we had three main focus areas, really to share, again, CAV-related activities, a theme of today as well, to identify challenges and really focus on solutions, what we can do to address those challenges, and then define some implementation steps. So those are kind of the three goals we had for the workshop. And at the workshop, we had over 40 practitioners that came from 15 state DOTs, Maryland Transportation Authority, Baltimore Metropolitan Council, Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So we had a great representation of the agencies on the East Coast. And just to say, what did we dive into? So I said that first goal was, what did we learn from each other? And on the data front, something near and dear to my heart, so huge opportunities because CAV will be providing a lot of data, but we also need to be able to manage it. And so this is an opportunity for us to encourage our senior managers and leaders the importance of managing data. A real, I think, positive aspect of the conversation we had, and it's in the report, is a list of data points. What data do DOTs, MPOs, and tolling authorities, what do we want? And why do we want that data? It's important for us to articulate that. It also highlighted some innovative data sharing approaches, such as the VDOT's Smarter Roads and Florida's Data Integration and Video Aggregation System, which has the best acronym with DIVAS. So Florida, awesome on that acronym. So data is a huge piece that we heard from our presentations from the states, big theme. On the legislative and regulation front, this is a rapidly evolving industry, so it's really challenging for us to kind of balance flexibility of regulation while still ensuring safety. And so we have some discussions about that, as well as balancing higher minimum levels of insurance and promoting competition, which is something that Robert will touch on in his comments. So one thing that was surprising to some of the workshop participants is that having CAV legislation is not necessarily a requirement to encourage deployment. And I think hearing from Maryland about their path, I think, was insightful for others at the workshop to hear about. On the collaboration front, this is a topic that really requires collaboration within a DOT, across agencies, and with external stakeholders. Our pre-workshop survey showed a wide range of stakeholders to be included in the CAV conversation. And I think in Connecticut, which we heard about at the workshop, having testimony provided by Uber and the American Insurers Association just kind of shows you the wide range of interested parties. And finally, on planning, it is just essential to consider CAV in our long-range transportation plans despite the uncertainty. So across the board, there's just no doubt that connected autonomous vehicles is already impacting our agencies today, and this will only increase. So on our second goal, I just put this one barrier and solutions up there. There's several more in the report, again, encouraging folks to look at that. So this challenge is just, again, we talk about this often, this is rapidly changing technology. So we thought about how do we react? So the idea is looking at not having a research repository just for research, but where can we pull out some actions on what agencies should do today? A challenge of making procurement less rigid and lengthy, and you can read some of these other ideas here. But I think the message of, start small, build a momentum was a good recommendation for how to address this barrier. And finally, on the implementation steps, We heard from the folks coming to the workshop that they wanted to leave with a couple of ideas, so these were some that came up. Some of them seem pretty obvious, but they're good to write down and make sure and act upon. So identifying a leader within an agency, stepping back for a moment and articulating why we're even excited about this connected autonomous vehicles. I know Fred is going to talk about that in his presentation. It's just so important to articulate why we're doing this. That multidisciplinary stakeholder group is essential for this particular topic. And then on the idea of starting small, to start with testing and pilots, and one idea, obviously was to engage in the SPAT challenge. So I think that might be the end of my slides. Oh, here we go. So on the CAV workshop, we have emailed the report to the CAV working group. When we declare it final as a result of this meeting, we'll post it on our website. And once that is done, we encourage you to share it with your colleagues within your agency and outside. So that was my quick overview of the report, and hopefully that encourages and excites everyone to take a look. So with that, I want to introduce our first speaker. So Robert Passmore, he is the Assistant Vice President of the Personal Lines Policy with the Property Casualty Insurance Association of America. And his responsibilities include legislative and regulatory policy development and issue identification for claims, personal automobile, boat and motorcycle insurance, as well as auto safety issues. So Bob serves as a media spokesperson as well as an issue expert for PCI before state and federal policymakers on these issues. He's also the staff lead for multiple PCI member committees to help set association policy direction on auto insurance claims, fraud, and auto physical damage. And Bob joined PCI in January 2007 with almost 22 years with Liberty Mutual in a variety of capacities. So the question is, Bob is joining us today because I had the privilege of hearing him speak about key insurance and liability issues related to the deployment of automated vehicles recently. And I'm really excited that he can share his knowledge and insights with all of you today. So, Robert, I turn the mic over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Trish, and thank you all for inviting me here to speak with you today. Okay, I got control. For those of you who haven't heard of us, the Property Casualty Insurers Association of America, or better known as and easier said as PCI, is the largest and most diverse property and casualty insurance trade association. We have nearly 1,000 member companies who together write over 43% of the automobile insurance in the United States. And as you might expect, auto insurers are keenly interested in automated vehicle technology and are looking ahead to what is likely to be a significant disruption in the way they do business. There have been some that have predicted the end of auto insurance, and we think those predictions are premature, and the auto insurance industry has proven its adaptability many times over the years. But there's no question there are certainly challenges for auto insurers to adapt to the changes that the increasing automation of vehicles will bring. And as we have for over a century, auto insurers have a central role to play, supporting innovation in transportation with insurance innovation, developing new products and services and claim handling methods, and preserving the very competitive auto insurance marketplace that we have today. As we've considered the issue with our members, we've been able to identify a lot of, looked at potential impact on auto insurers, and really we find that there's a lot more questions than answers at this point, but let's go through a couple of the questions. Most believe that automated vehicles will mean fewer accidents in the long term, but there are some questions about how human drivers will adapt to sharing the road with self-driving cars or automated vehicles. There's also some questions about will there actually be more vehicles on the road in the short term as a self-driving car won't need to sit in a parking lot or in a garage waiting for a human driver. Perhaps the biggest question is who is responsible, the manufacturer, the user, driver, or both when there's an accident. Determining if the car's system was in control and what it did will be critical. This added product liability element is likely to mean more complex cases arising out of accidents, therefore some more expensive claims to deal with, even if there are fewer of them. Also consider that the technology itself is expensive, and so it's going to be more costly to fix after an accident as well. We're already starting to see some of that with the assisted driving technology, auto braking, things like that, already starting to happen. There will be opportunities to develop new products to insure self-driving cars and automated vehicles, but will we see some sort of a change in the ownership model to something you subscribe to, like your cell phone service? The phrase that's often used is mobility as service, rather as mobility being something that you own. So this could likely see a shift from personal auto to more commercial auto insurance. Today, auto insurance pricing is largely based on drivers, but how meaningful is the driver's record when the car drives itself completely or most of the time? Does a rating based on automated driving systems track record fit in the current regulatory regime for auto insurance? And once again, data will be key. Insurers will need to be able to identify vehicles that have automated driving systems and differentiate between them in order to be able to develop products and pricing to support those kind of innovations. So we've been talking about these issues and more with our members for several years now, and have identified a handful of key policy questions that are playing out in the states and at the federal level that are of particular interest to our industry. First, the majority of the debate seems to is focusing on safety. Everybody seems to agree that automating the driving function has the potential to significantly reduce, if not completely eliminate, accidents, injuries, and deaths on our roads. The question is, what should be put in place by the states and the federal government to ensure the technology and the way it's applied is safe, while at the same time not unduly limiting the technology and its development. Regardless of the safety benefits that are achieved, there will be accidents, especially while we have environments where automated vehicles interact with human-driven vehicles. The question becomes, does our system of apportioning liability for auto accidents and compensating victims need to change in any way? Something that has become clear is that the information generated by the vehicle systems, the data, the photos, the video, is going to be critical to determine liability quickly and get claims handled and victims compensated promptly and fairly. Manufacturers and developers will want to closely guard that data to protect their intellectual property that they've made substantial investments in. And vehicle users will want to have their privacy protected, and everyone wants to ensure that the vehicles are protected from cyber attacks. Finding the right balance between those interests is going to be critical. And finally, does the way that, as I mentioned before, does the way we insure vehicles need to change? Right now, financial responsibility laws apply primarily to the owner of a vehicle. Does that need to change somehow now that the vehicle systems are doing more of the actual driving and products liability issues are more of a factor in some of these cases? As a result of those discussions, we've developed what we call a set of essential elements regarding the regulation of autonomous vehicles, which we believe will allow insurers to adapt as the nature of driving and transportation changes. I should note that our members also recognize that that there is so much we don't know at this point that it's likely we'll have to add or adapt to our list as we go along, and I think that's something that everyone who has anything to do with this particular issue is recognizing too, as the whole technology and how these things could be applied evolves. So let's I'll take you through some of our principles real quick. First, safety. While PCI doesn't take a position on specific testing requirements, guidelines, or standards for automated driving systems, we think clarity is critical to promote public confidence and provide direction for the technology developers and manufacturers for compliance. We think that modifications to existing auto safety laws and motor vehicle safety standards should be rare, and exemptions for federal motor vehicle safety standards should not be permitted for crash protection standards, since as I talked about before, these vehicles are going to be sharing the road with other human-driven vehicles and likely to be crashed and be crashed into for some time to come. The next is liability determination. PCI believes that our current state-based system of determining liability for accidents and compensating victims should be able to adapt to the changing nature of the driving risk if the vehicle data is accessible on reasonable terms and in a form that allows for prompt investigation and resolution of claims for damage and injury that arise from the crash. PCI has been working with our members to better define insurer needs in this area and in finding common ground with automakers and automated vehicle developers. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of slides. Insurers need to be able to identify vehicles with automated driving systems and have access to performance data on reasonable terms to be able to develop products and pricing methods that reflect the changing nature of the driving risk with the support of our current state-based insurance regulatory system. Whether the vehicle is driven by a system or by a human, there will be crashes that cause property damage and injuries, but neither are likely to increase in severity simply because an automated system is doing the driving. States have already established financial responsibility requirements for motor vehicles based on how the vehicles are used, and those limits don't need to change, or our view is that those limits don't need to change as they pertain to the owner of the vehicle with automated driving capability. However, we believe that it is reasonable for states to establish new and distinct financial responsibility requirements for the manufacturers or developers of autonomous driving systems, again, because they'll be brought into these cases much more often than we see today. So, as I indicated earlier, as we've been talking with our members and the automakers and the AV developers, we've tried to sketch out some more detail on what kind of data access we would need. It sounds like that's also something that you've all been thinking about as well. So this might dovetail nicely with what some of the things that you've been discussing. But so the first thing that I should mention over top of this is, we very much see this as something. The data that the vehicles collect and the access is something that we really don't want to see multiple standards out there. I think it would probably serve everyone's interest to have a common framework and a common set of rules that apply no matter which state that you're applying, if an insurer is trying to get access to a vehicle or a vehicle manufacturer has to allow access to it, that there should be one standard for securing that information. But the kind of information an insurer would need goes along with like this. First, being able to identify automated driving system equipped vehicles and have sufficient information to be able to differentiate between the systems that would also be reflected in motor vehicle records such as titling and registration and crash reporting. The identifier would attach to the vehicle when it is manufactured or retrofitted with this kind of capability. Much like today, we have for drivers, we have a system of being able to differentiate between drivers because we know the different driving records, we know their accidents, we know their tickets, we know those kinds of things. Differentiating between systems is going to be important in the same ways. A requirement that all ADS-equipped vehicles have data recording capability and that the vehicle owner can authorize secure access to the vehicle by an insurer without having to secure consent from the system manufacturer. This very much follows the rules that we have in place today regarding event data recorders in cars. Those rules only apply for those vehicles that do have event data recorders. There's not actually a requirement that they have event data recorders. The nature of the vehicles themselves and how they operate means that there is going to have to be some data recording, but we do think that there should be, that is something that should be required. Again, I talked before about the vehicle owner being able to authorize access to vehicle data without having to go through some sort of a third party to do so. Again, that's very much how the event data recorder laws work today. And finally, establishing a common set of data recording elements that really, the best way to describe this is to track the kind of information that one would get from talking to a human driver. Things like speed, direction of travel, steering, braking, objects that it's perceived, things like that. The kind of information we in the insurance industry get today when we're investigating a claim by talking to the drivers, or your law enforcement people would get as well by asking those kind of questions, talking to the drivers. Those are going to be the same kind of data points that we're going to need from the vehicle itself when it's doing the driving, and it'll need to be in a format that's going to be useful to an insurer or investigator or law enforcement, for that matter, to establish liability or responsibility for the accident. So that is a quick view of a very big issue for auto insurers. Obviously, it's an issue that we're following on a daily basis and staying in close contact with our members and trying to do a lot of outreach to let everyone know, stakeholders know what we're thinking. I hope that you find that helpful, and I thank you again for inviting me to join you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, Robert. And I appreciate your comments. They reflect some of the comments I was, again, happy to have crossed paths with you. And I think this message that accidents will be happening for the foreseeable future and how we prepare ourselves for that, what information we need to get in treating the autonomous vehicle like we would a driver that the police talk to, I think is helpful perspective. So we have one question that came in from Roger Cohen, but how can the states kind of move in coordination to promote these national standards being adopted? And I guess kind of phrasing that a little bit for you, Robert, is with your organization and with an organization like the Coalition, how can we kind of team up to move towards some of these national standards that would benefit all of us? Do you have some ideas on that?
Yeah, I think you're already doing the first part of it. I think you're going to have to follow a process similar to like what we're doing. Is first of all figure out what you need and how you would get it. Some of that is going to be similar to what you do today, and well, like we found is that defining what you need is going to be the critical first step, and then bringing that to the table into the policy-making discussion, bringing that to the other groups that are talking. There's a lot of groups that are interested in access to the data, but as you heard me talk about before, there's a pretty sensitive number of issues that need to be considered about privacy, about cybersecurity, and about protecting intellectual property rights of companies that are investing a lot in this here too. But there should be a way to balance all those things and provide information that not only insurers need, but state transportation regulators need to be able to fulfill their remit under all this. But I think the first thing it sounds like you're already moving towards is figuring out what you need. And then I would say think about, how are similar things done today, and are there ways that we can use existing processes? I would say that one of the approaches that we've tried to take is looking for ways to minimize disruption to the system. The whole automating of the driving function is a significant disruption. Is there ways that we can use existing regulatory frameworks, things that everyone is familiar with and everybody already knows how to comply with at one level? Is there ways that are there ways that those can be adapted to achieve these kind of results? But trying to put as much definition behind what you need and thinking about frameworks that you use today that can be adapted, that are familiar to the other stakeholders, that can be adapted to use going forward. I think those are the important things. And then be part of the process at wherever possible. And I guess that's the approach that we've taken.
And I think, Bob, there may be opportunity for there's similar data pieces that I think DOTs, MPOs, and owners of infrastructure need that you're asking for. So there might be an opportunity if we speak with kind of a unified voice that we can push forward towards kind of national standards or a list of data points we'd want from a vehicle. So that's something we should continue talking about and see an opportunity there.
I agree completely. I know we've been talking to automakers and AV developers just for those reasons and having those kind of discussions, and I would encourage you to do the same.
Okay. And so two other questions come in when I go over, and then we may need to move on to Fred Payne. So one from Daniel Jacobs, which a great question, asking about shifting towards mileage-based insurance, given that the analysis and exploration we have of a distance-based fee instead of a fuel tax. So yeah, I don't know if you can see the chat, question in the chat box that's saying insurance currently generating these a fixed cost per time period model today.
Yeah. You know, I think I guess I separate that not necessarily from a vehicle that can drive itself, but the today's connected car. There's you know, even the new cars rolling off the lots today are more connected than ever before. And there's, you know, today if you're going to do some sort of usage-based or mileage-based insurance, it would usually involve some sort of a plugging something into the ODB2 port or downloading an app on your phone. But more and more these vehicles are coming with that capability when they're manufactured. So you're right, there's a lot of opportunities to build that kind of connectivity into, you know, auto insurance products, and that is being explored widely. Here, you know, the big question for these vehicles that drive themselves is really down to the ownership model. I mean, and the question is, do people continue to own vehicles? And if they do, will they own as many? Or do we see a move toward transportation as mobility as service, where you subscribe to it? And you really don't have to look any further than Uber and Lyft. You know, there are a lot of folks particularly in urban areas, that don't own vehicles anymore, and they rely on services like Uber and Lyft to provide their transportation because of the flexibility and convenience, and they don't have to maintain or insure or find a place to park your vehicle. I think that's, you know, looking forward into the automated vehicle space, that's the big question about for insurance is, does this go more toward the commercial side and that transportation as service, or do we still have do we have a hybrid model where you still have individuals that own their own vehicles?
Great, thank you. All right, this ought to be our last question, and we'll see if we can carve out some time at the end here as well. So thanks for sticking around, Robert. But Tom Mazar is asking from Connecticut, just maybe it's more for a group question too, as well as you, Robert. If are folks looking at the legal issues associated with accessing data systems after an accident? I don't know if you have any insights on who might be looking at the legal feasibility, or can we do that?
Yeah, I think everyone, a lot of folks are looking at that too. There's been a lot of academic papers written about liability issues, but you know, really, when it comes down to it, it comes down to the difference between, you know, your negligence-based liability system and products liability. It also comes down to, will you have enough information to be able to determine if, you know, the system made an error, if the system didn't do what it was supposed to do. You know, on one hand, you have to judge the system like you would any other driver. Did it, you know, on a negligence basis, and then, you know, is there something about the vehicle or the vehicle system itself that was defective, and all the attendant issues that come around that. I think that's a whole separate webinar, but there's a lot of discussion around that. But I think it all starts with the data access and sharing issue.
Right, agreed. So there's a couple more questions that come in, and I think, Robert, what I might do is see if we can provide a quick response to folks, and we'll share it with folks. Maybe do that after the webinar. Just for time constraints, it's always painful to have to do that. But we're going to move to, thank you very much. This is where we do a round of applause on the webinar for you. I appreciate your time and comments, insightful comments there. So next I want to introduce, thanks, Howard. Next I want to introduce Fred Payne. So Fred Payne is a Greenville County councilman. Let me forward the slide up. There you go. Thank you. Who, after being elected in 2006, is finishing up his third term. And he is recognized as the council leader in 21st century transportation solutions, including serving as county coordinator of its FHWA A-Taxi shuttle project, which we'll be hearing about today, and an executive committee member of the Carolinas Alliance for Innovation Consortium. From 2013 to 2016, Fred was the chair of the Greenville County Economic Development Corporation, where he promoted Green Villages development with multimodal transport hubs as places to work, dine, shop, learn, heal, or play. So I'm excited that Fred is joining us today to discuss how to bring, you know, connected and autonomous opportunities to your local communities. Fred, take it away.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank you all for inviting me to share today, and I want to tell the group here, you all are very fortunate to have such strong leadership in your I-95 corridor team. They are an outstanding group of people to work with. So the next slide is this one, actually. This one. Joanna, am I going to do it? Or let's see. All I want to say is I am on County Council. I'm on the CA4I Innovation Board, but I'm really just an ordinary guy working to be a civil servant. And I believe that probably most of you see yourselves as civil servants. You're doing the best you can with the money that you have. We're going to talk about something today that might enable you to do your job better. In 2016, we filed for a, Joanna's going to slip a slide in here. When we were preparing for this, there were several questions that came up, and they said state DOTs are going to be interested in answering these questions that relate to ACEs, which is Automated Connected Electric Shared Vehicles. And so I had a friend that went to a conference and came back, and he said, Fred, I found out the answer is money, whatever the question is. So I'm going to give you the answers. The answer is safety. The question is, what does state DOTs want out of connected autonomous vehicles? Safety. That's the priority. Welcome mats. That's what state DOTs need to give for successful CAV projects. Supportive policies and legislation. That's what state DOTs need to do to help implement economic development projects. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. That's how state DOTs planners can support GAV projects like A-taxis. Private money, that's the answer. The public question is, where's the money coming from? Monetize access and data. Bob just did a good job of talking about how insurance companies are very interested in data and access to data. And one of the ways I believe state DOTs can actually find some money is funding ACEs, Automated Connected Electric Shared Mobility Project, where you get a small portion for allowing your rights of way and this kind of thing to be used for access, and you collect data along your routeways. The next column the answer is USD and NHTSA policy, and the question was asked in the insurance thing is, who can coordinate answers for one OEM to work with regulations and laws in 50 states and 500 cities? They don't want to work with 50 states and 500 cities. They want to work with one national policy, and we need to find that. Let me give you an example of a complicated problem that you would think it's simple, but Greenville's dealing with this right now. How does a company satisfy law enforcement requirements to address potential operating challenges for motor vehicles? We began with a Cushman 6-passenger, basically a golf cart. It qualified as a golf cart, licensed as a golf cart, permitted that way. It had a driver behind the wheel if necessary, and it had regular insurance. We're bringing in new vehicles, the Ollie local motor shuttles. They have no wheel and no driver. How do we put a licensed driver behind the wheel when there's no wheel? What about routes? Who's responsible for the routes? DOTs handle roadways, but Federal Highway handles guideways, railways that are where green pods, an automated shuttle solution, might travel. And then actually the air above the roads and the railroads, Federal Highway has control of that, especially above 400 feet, and drones are in that space. And then lastly, who do you license an operator to ride in an automated vehicle? We have drivers of regular cars now. In the future, we're going to have safety operators. We're going to have somebody in the control booth. But what about, what do you do about the drivers? Who's in charge? So the next slide is a slide that we developed in 2016 when we applied for the USDOT Smart City Challenge. And this is just a slide that says we envisioned as our big, bold, innovative solution that the federal USDOT asked us to offer. using every type of vehicle that's out there now, from golf cart type vehicles to Proterra buses, which are made here in Greenville, to BMW vehicles that are automated and electric, and then some automated shuttles that we didn't have at that time, but we envisioned having them. So that was our broad vision, and we're on track now. So it was a broad vision to go from GSP Airport on the right-hand side over to Clemson University on the left-hand side in the third phase. The first phase was going to be the small green circles, where basically we were going to be utilizing A-taxi shuttles, which we've now got a grant to deploy those, and we are in fact deploying them. Not exactly where those locations are, but pretty close. And then the blue circle illustrates phase 2, where we would try to connect downtown Greenville and downtown Malden and Simpsonville along that Highway 276 corridor. So this one slide really sort of summarizes our total grant process. We had to create an organization called Carolina's Alliance for Innovation, which is a special Greenville consortium of public-private partners, and it's a necessary element for mass mobility solutions. And our solutions are going to deal with real needs, first and last mile accessibility primarily, but also 911 health-related calls for non-emergency health care calls. But the location there is CUI cars. CUI cars, Clemson University International Center for Automotive Research, and it connects to some other locations there that you can see on real roads with different vehicles. We have different vehicles on the roads now, so in our deployment of automated vehicles, we want to use different vehicles as we can, and we're going to add future partners like Local Motors, Ollie, pictured there, and Green for You Technologies, and other companies that will need to have be qualified to utilize the same automation equipment that we have. And then real proactive partners, where we have the blue circles are governmental relations, and very, very important, but you need also corporate partners, foundation partners, academia partners, grants partners, and you have to have an organization, and for us that's Carolina's Alliance for Innovation. The ultimate goal here is sustainable mobility. So this slide just says we have a lot of different partners, and we're always looking for more. If you're listening and you'd like to be a partner with us, call us later. This is a slide that represents the challenge that DOTs have every day, whether you're a county DOT organization or a state or a national. You deal with realities. The map on the left is a reality of the situation of where your roads go and what you're dealing with. And this particular one was used when we were analyzing this corridor, which had been a railroad corridor, and we wanted to convert it into a multimodal bike, walk, A-taxi type corridor. And on the right is what we did almost 10 years ago now, when Greenville County was imagining our future. We said we're going to have centers, which basically those are commercial developments, high densities, high impact areas, corridors that connect these centers, and then the communities in between the corridors. And you can see one of our corridors is designated as a transit corridor, but the future for utilizing automated vehicles is probably down transit corridors and in those community centers neighborhoods. Now, what we envision the centers are what I call green villages. We call them green villages. 100 years ago, we had a lot of mill villages in Greenville County, and everybody loves a community where you feel you're a part of it. You have ownership in it. You can live, work, shop, dine, and play there. So in green villages are attractive, green, livable, sustainable, walkable, and they're connected with improved transportation. They're mixed-use communities where people love to live, work, and play, but they're connected internally with A-taxi shuttles, And broader connectivity then would be with green pods, future automated transport network technology that I believe can work in Greenville and in other communities. So this diagram just shows that A-taxis represent the kinds of mobility that you would have getting into a city center, and perhaps actually connecting broader areas with green pods connecting regional centers and a larger area in a network kind of a pattern around that. And the main transportation corridors are you can see connect again to outside of the region and inside the region. Now, why autonomous vehicles? Well, because autonomous vehicles bring staggering advantages, and cities like Greenville can accelerate their adoption. I'm going to mention just the top three here. Increased safety is a primary factor. Human error, human miscalculations cause 90+% of all accidents. We can eliminate that with automated vehicles. Increased access for underserved communities. Buses don't generally run 24/7. Automated vehicles can do that. So there's a lot of increase of accessibility, and obviously you can increase infrastructure capacity if the vehicles are coordinated electronically and so forth. There are other advantages, but I won't go into them now. Why Greenville, or a city in your region in the I-95 corridor? We believe Greenville is the right time, right place to make something happen. We're a mid-sized metropolitan area. We're in the middle of Charlottesville, the megalopolis on I-85 corridor. We're a microcosm of the challenges and problems that most communities face. We can scale up or down. Our community is very engaged. We have the CA4I consortium that involves political, academic, and business groups. A main reason that Greenville is why Greenville or a community like us is we are proactively seeking innovation transportation solutions. We're asking, why not now? Why not Greenville? We're trying to deploy A-taxis. We got a grant to deploy them, and we're actively exploring deploying green pods. And we're seeking solutions that are viable, scalable, and replicable. Clemson University International Center for Automotive Research and our International Transportation Innovation Center are two assets that make us important. And the fact that we have a large number of our citizens employed in transportation-related manufacturing is very important. Now, this slide represents the Greenville A-taxis and the fact that they really are a basic unit of ACE's mobility. Again, automated, connected, electric, shared mobilities. It is a unique Greenville approach, and our prime partner is an automation partner, Robotic Research. They're headquartered up in Maryland. They helped us redeploy in August of 2017 the Cushman vehicle from Fort Bragg to CUI car. And now, as we get the grant and begin to implement that, we're going to add more neighborhood electric vehicle partners, and we're going to other automated mobility districts in 2018 through 2020. We're going to Burdett, which is a high-income community, and Parker, which is a low-income community. And these two, the map on the left shows CUI car and Burdett. They're adjacent to each other. They're separated by a big river. That's a major corridor, north-south, and it's important in our community. We actually have access up on one end of CUI car across a recently renovated 4-lane highway now across the interstate, and actually underneath the Interstate 85 in an old railroad track that we're taking the tracks up and creating this multimodal bicycle path. But we'll look more at that later. But the deployment phases, we've already begun the deployment. And one of the things that we did was we put up these signs, self-driving vehicle areas. That's not a standard sign, I don't think. We had it made for this. It's not a warning sign, but people do need to know that there are self-driving vehicles in the area. And you'll want to do that if you move in this direction. Now, this circle here, the green line is Lawrence Road, and the orange line is the old railroad corridor that we're making into a multimodal swamp rabbit trail. It improves access from each of the little green dots or centers that we hope to create a station, multimodal station, where bicycles and walkers and automated taxis and buses and park and ride. Cars come in and park and ride from that location to wherever they want to go further distance. But the hubs add site value, and they serve as focal areas for green villages. The green lines are a quarter of a mile distance, and the yellow lines are a half-mile distance. And you can see there's a lot of overlap between them. The hubs are really about a mile apart, but so the people would only have to walk a half mile in order to get to either of their sites. And so anyway, real estate's affected by that. Parker's a model. The dark area is the city. The light area is a county, so it's multi-jurisdictional. The poor communities, one of the poorest in America, 41% of the residents don't own cars. And A-taxi shuttles can improve access and mobility at a lower cost. That's why we're looking at it. We're also looking at pod cars for personal rapid transit. For example, the one up at West Virginia University in Morgantown has been operating for 40 years. It increases safety, over 2 million vehicle miles traveled with 0 deaths, and it reduces roadway congestion. We hope that we can have green pods in Greenville in the next couple of minutes. The next couple of years. This is an unsolicited proposal that we received, and we're excited by something like this because TransitX came to us and said, look, we could build a system 341 miles. We'll bring our own private technology. We'll bring a partner that's an engineering, procurement, construction operator, and we'll bring global financing partners. What we want you to do is provide some support. And here's the kind of support they want us to provide through a public-private partnership. Public right-of-way for access and permitting. They don't want to be held up by gaining access, and the permitting process needs to move quickly. And then they bring private investors to design, finance, build, and operate the facilities. We then come behind with a TIF-type organization in South Carolina. We call it multi-county industrial parks, and we can repay the infrastructure out of property tax increases over a period of time. And then during the operational phase, we believe that private funds are going to provide the operational costs for operations and maintenance, fare box, access fees, advertising, sponsorships, everything motivated by partners who have a local community interest, but they also have a maximum self-interest. They want to save money on parking deck costs or get their employees to work 24/7, or they want to maximize return on their assets. So the last thing I want to say, the final thoughts are 7 habits of highly effective people say: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, where 1 + 1 actually equals 3, and sharpen the saw. Attend seminars like this, webinars like this. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Great. Thank you, Fred. Hopefully folks on the phone are getting some inspiration of how this can get done. So I think, Fred, you're a tough act to follow, what you've done in Greenville. And as one with young children, I'm going to have to tell them that actually 1 + 1 = 3, not 2, which they may be surprised to hear, but I love it.
Well, only
so thinking of, say again?
Only when you synergize, only when you manage to work together.
Indeed. That is the theme of the coalition. It sounds like what you've been able to build in Greenville. And I think it's important, as folks on the webinar, to look at thinking about mid-sized metropolitan areas in your own state where something similar might be able to bubble up and through a lot of leadership like Fred has given, may be able to come to fruition. So do folks have some questions for Fred? We have probably time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. So this is a jam-packed webinar, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It looks like looks like Mary Grace and Roger Cohen are typing. So Roger, one thing you could do, if you could just take yourself off mute, you can go ahead and ask your question instead of typing it if you want.
Sure, thanks, and thanks, Fred. I just wanted to know if you, in the process of advancing your project, have come across issues of procurement issues with respect to, the old school lumbering system of public procurement and some of the sole sourcing requirements that this technology requires, since you've really advanced the project.
Yes, sir. Procurement is a major issue, and we have to abide by the county procurement laws and whatever procurement laws are out there. So, yes, sir, we have to go through that. We do try to accelerate where possible, but I don't need to go into it. Procurement is a big issue, and it's a challenge for innovation. It really discourages innovative actions.
Fred, have you been able to find any ways?
Excuse me?
Sorry, go ahead, Fred.
I was going to say, the slide in there that says we had an unsolicited proposal, I wish it were possible for governmental entities to accept unsolicited proposals. And you all may have some ideas about how that could happen.
Great, thank you. As much as it pains me to do this, Fred, we do need to move to our roundtable, but I encourage folks to keep sending some questions in the chat pod, and we will ask Fred to share some more of his insights and get everyone back answers. But I do at this point going to move to our agency roundtable. We've got just over a half an hour left and quite a few agencies to go through. We have, as you can see here, 9 agencies, so I'm going to kind of be like a time, a time jerk, I guess, and encourage folks to, we're excited to hear what you have to say, but let's try to keep the comments to between just a few minutes, so 3 to 5 minutes. All right, with that wonderful introduction, Dan, you want to take it away, and I can be your Vanna if you want. You can tell me when to forward the slides. Actually, I want to get Justin. Would you mind doing the forwarding the slides?
Sure.
Thanks. Great. All right, Daniel.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, sound great.
Okay, good. Thank you for the opportunity. I would just say to the last point, the MBTA passed last year or so in innovations proposal policy, or an unsolicited proposal policy. We took the lead of LA. I'm happy to share that around with anybody who would be interested. I don't think we needed any sort of legal changes or statutory changes to kind of open up that door, but it was an interesting process that we went through, and I'm happy to share that. But moving on to the next slide,
thank you.
I want to share some of the information updates to our autonomous vehicles program here in Massachusetts and some of the testing that's going on in Boston. So in Massachusetts, we are testing under the guidance of an executive order passed by Governor Baker about a year and a half ago. So there are no state statutes or regulations specific to autonomous vehicles. We're just working off the executive order. Also created a working group to really take a look at some of the issues around AVs. It's mostly staffed with state officials and then a couple people, the Transportation Commission or Committee from the legislature, and then a couple civilians. We can move on to the next slide. So, messed up some of the text here, but so there are 2 companies that are testing in Massachusetts right now, both startups out of MIT. Nutonomy, which was recently acquired by Aptiv, which is a Tier 1 supplier, or well, it was part of Delphi, they've been testing for about a year and a half. They've got just 5 vehicles here, but they've driven over 1,000 miles in the seaport, and they really see the miles that they drive in the city of Boston as high leverage miles. You know, they're not racking up millions and millions of miles, but the miles that they do drive on public roads are really valuable and insightful for them. An Optimus Ride has a vehicle, the second vehicle on the left there, that's more kind of like the golf cart style. It's a Polaris vehicle. It seats from 4 to 6, depending on the model. They've got actually 15 of those vehicles, and again, they've been driving more than 1,000 miles on some of the same roads in the city of Boston. They're looking at expanding some of their operations to a development a couple miles outside of the city, so it should be an interesting opportunity for us to kind of explore some of the first last mile opportunities with respect to AVs. And there's several others from academia and some other OEMs that have expressed an interest, but no other companies that have yet kind of applied to do testing here. And we do have quarterly reports and other information that gets posted on the site, which the City of Boston has. Yeah, sorry, you can go. The working group, it's been an interesting mix. We do have public meetings for the working group, so they've been pretty well attended by media, by companies, academia. So it's been an interesting turnout. We've had about 8 meetings from the past year and a half. Covered a range of topics, you know, just discussing the ecosystem and the industry at large, you know, what's going on in Massachusetts. We have the companies come in and give us updates. So it's been interesting. It'll be curious to see what the group kind of prepares in terms of a deliverable. We're hoping to wrap this up by the 2-year anniversary, which will be about October this year. So, you know, ideally we'll be filing a report that provides some recommendations about how the state could consider to move forward within the industry. So that'll be interesting. We can move to the next one. That might be it, but yeah. So I think one thing that we're doing, you know, differently in Massachusetts as compared to how a lot of states are approaching this, with perhaps the exception of Connecticut, is really trying to have a close collaboration with the municipalities that testing is occurring in. So, you know, it's been an interesting way to kind of work with municipalities. It's obviously taken us a little bit longer to kind of hit the ground, but you know, now that we have everybody on board, it makes sort of moving together a little bit easier. You know, we try to engage with the companies that are here as much as possible, and as well, you know, some of the companies that are not yet testing here, or, you know, perhaps don't even have plans to test here, just in terms of understanding the state of technology, some of the use cases for this potential AV deployments, and then, you know, some of the valuable insight we've started to get from the companies that are here are some, you know, feedback about road designs and some of the infrastructure. So, for example, you know, they pointed out to us that LED traffic lights are just generally easier for their systems to pick up and identify. So it's just something that the City of Boston can, you know, look at as they're doing their capital planning, you know, thinking about changing some of their plans for infrastructure moving forward. And, you know, with respect to some of the crashes that have occurred recently, I think one of the things that there's a lot of interest in here is trying to develop a good and effective crash protocol for if and when crashes do occur. How do we learn from those and really move the industry forward together? So for next steps, you know, we're going to try to facilitate a more of a regional testing approach. Right now, we require companies to negotiate an agreement with each municipality that they want to test in. We know that's obviously pretty burdensome, so we're trying to simplify that process by just inviting any municipalities that are interested to join a sort of regional process that will simplify it on both ends. And then just, you know, continuing public meetings, continuing to engage the public about this, and trying to educate policymakers and the public at large. I hope that was under 5 minutes.
That was great, Daniel. So thank you so much. I know we're going fast and furious here. So we're going to move to our next roundtable report out from Connecticut. I know we have Tom and Eric's your name on here, but I don't know who's going to be taking the mic. Maybe it might be Peter, but I'll turn it over to you guys.
Hi, Trish. Hi, everyone. This is Pete. Tom and Eric are also on the line as well. They might jump in. I was fortunate enough to get out of jury duty early enough to make it back here. So I am back here. So, but Tom and Eric are on the line. If you have any questions, you can ask them as well, or as me. So next slide. The topic I was asked to talk about last December was our workshop was the autonomous vehicle law that we passed here in Connecticut, and I'll talk really briefly on that and then move into the pilot program. The three main components of the law that was passed last summer on autonomous vehicles. The first component defined a lot of terminologies that was in sync with SAE and national standards, as well as created some state-specific terminology that allowed us to move forward with pilot testing here in Connecticut. The second main component of the law is that it created a pilot program for testing fully autonomous vehicles here in Connecticut. And the third component of the law is that it created this task force, legislative task force, to kind of evaluate and monitor not only the pilot program, but also to evaluate any sort of potential laws or regulations that we may need to enact or adopt moving forward. Next slide. So previous slide. The pilot program itself, I'll go really quickly through this, and I also want to say thank you to Daniel, who was the previous speaker. Without him, he was very instrumental in helping us come up with a lot of the language that we embedded in not only the law, but also the framework, the details, if you will. For our pilot program, we kind of borrowed a lot of information and wording and processes that Massachusetts had, so we're trying to make ourselves look as much as possible similar to our neighbors, and hopefully we can keep that momentum moving on throughout the region. So our pilot program, predominantly it is a municipal program. The state will allow 4 municipalities to conduct testing of autonomous vehicles in their municipality. Municipalities have to execute agreements with autonomous vehicle testers. Then the testing requirements themselves are outlined in the law, as well as the framework document that was just published online about a couple weeks ago, that our governor announced. We have an interagency working group that's reviewing all the various applications. Testing, it is a mixed traffic testing process, so it will occur on public roads within the municipal borders that are open for testing. It also is prohibited from limited access highways for the time being. That was an interest of our legislature, to be able to kind of contain the types of pilot testing that goes on, and that the hours and specifications that would need to be spelled out in the pilot program applications. The test vehicles themselves are SAE level 4 predominantly vehicles. When 5s come out, they're allowed, but it is specific to SAE level 4 and 5 fully autonomous vehicles, acknowledging that some vehicles might be more naturally a 2 or a 3, but they might be testing level 4 technology, and that's fine as well. As was mentioned earlier from the insurance presenter, we are going to be identifying these vehicles by VIN, make, year, and model, and identifying them as a fully autonomous vehicle. The vehicles have to be registered with our DMV here in Connecticut and insured prior to testing, and we followed national standards and recommendations by AMVA. I believe it was $5 million for insurance. And any sort of NHTSA or Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards that come out regarding autonomous vehicles. Currently, Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards do not address autonomous vehicles, but when they do come out to specifically address them, any vehicles that are on the road must abide by those standards, and at this point they must be just deemed street legal by NHTSA. The operator of the vehicle has to be someone who has an operator's license, someone of age 16 or older. Person has to be trained and capable of maintaining control of the vehicle, has to be trained in operating that vehicle. And during testing, one of the key things that the legislature wanted us to put in here was that that the operator of the vehicle, so we did define that term as a human driver, has to be able to be seated in the driver's seat, acknowledging that some of these vehicles, like some of the shuttles, the Navia shuttles, locomotor shuttles at level 4, may not have a driver's seat or even a wheel, but we're working with that right now to allow that, as long as whoever is able to be the human driver in the vehicle is still able to maintain manual control. And as far as I understand, a lot of these vehicles do have manual override capabilities, and that would be required as part of testing to ensure safety. Next slide. So some of the interests that we have here at Connecticut DOT, we are in a kind of a partnership mode right now. We're trying to encourage sort of a portfolio approach for pilot testing, so that we're kind of testing different challenges and problems and scenarios in different locations. Some of them might be first last mile issues or congestion reduction issues, or maybe a campus circulator or some sort of bus rapid transit testing on our fixed guideway here in central Connecticut. We definitely encourage pilots that have not only multiple partners but institutional partners, especially ones that have strategic value to the agency. We here at Connecticut DOT will be offering a variety of different resources and technical support. We're considering applying for a federal ITS grant as of right now, and also working directly with UConn to support review and analysis of various data associated with the different pilots that are going on around the state or will be going on. And that we're also looking to collaborate with other entities, whether it's the I-95 Corridor Coalition, members of the Connected Vehicle Pool Fund study, which we just joined recently, as well as the folks up here in New England. We're working on a cross-border connected autonomous vehicle research project to identify ways that we can start working together. Next slide. And if Eric's on the line, I'll ask him to jump in. If not, I don't know if he's unmuted.
Yep, I am here.
You want to talk about this real quick, Eric?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you kind of a quick overview. So definitely the UConn's interest in this is to obviously build our knowledge base and help share some lessons learned. We're also not only primarily interested in the vehicles, but what is the human factor that's involved with this? So what are some of the limitations to adoption? What are people's hesitations? So doing that type of research and support of the pilot programs in terms of surveys and, you know, just the human perception of autonomous vehicles and maybe how that perception change as they see those vehicles driving down the roadway is kind of an interest of UConn in our research group. We are looking at several campus pilots to be part of the pilot program. We also have, are in the process of building an autonomous vehicle driving simulator within the Transportation Safety Research Center at UConn. We're also looking to partner with, obviously, the Connecticut DOT, but other industry partners. So we have a lot of private groups, similar to what we heard with the Greenville area, where there's a lot of industry partners that are interested, have the funds to do some testing, and are really looking to get into the autonomous vehicle realm and may be able to help some of these pilots move along through funding moving forward. And then next slide. And then just kind of in closing, just to make the group aware that on June 12th and 13th, we have the 2018 Northeast Autonomous and Connected Vehicle Summit. We have a lot of great speakers coming, several OEMs from Toyota, BMW, Navia will be there, Local Motors and Ali will be there, NTSB will be there speaking. So the first day is on autonomous vehicles, and the second day is connected vehicles, and we're really hoping for a lot of discussion and networking that comes out of that event. And I think that's our last slide.
Great, thanks you guys. All right, so we're going to move on to our next roundtable report out from New Hampshire, and also want to encourage folks, if they have questions for the speakers, we probably won't have much discussion time, keep adding them into the pot chat, and we will include some responses in our notes and also continue to foster dialogue. So continue asking your questions. We just may not be able to do a lot on the phone. All right, Susan, take it away. So Susan, you're still on mute.
No, I believe, this is Joanna, I believe that Susan is not available. She's hoping to have someone fill in. It doesn't look like Cody's here either. So you can just kind of walk through them quickly and move on to the next one.
All right, I think what we'll do, just for sake of time, we'll share the contents of this slide with folks on the webinar and our notes. So why don't we move on to our next report out from Rhode Island.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, good. Hi, this is Julia Gold. So I'm from Rhode Island DOT. I'm our Chief of Sustainability and Innovation, and I have my colleagues Pam Cotter and Christos and Afantos are on the call today too. I know we're really short on time and there's a lot of other people who are going to give updates, so I will go through these slides quickly. Thank you for whoever is advancing them. So one thing I just want to quickly point out, and I think one of our first presenters mentioned the importance of building a team. So our department has really prioritized innovation and new technologies and how to integrate this all into our department. And so we actually have, as part of our organization, we have a new office, the Policy for Innovation and Transportation Crew. So the slide you see here, this is our team. really great people to work with, so you'll be seeing all of us as we move forward with this work. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview. I won't go through all of this, but our efforts started a little bit over a year ago. Many of you have been involved and have heard about the different work we've been doing, and we're really excited to be moving forward. Next slide. So the project I want to focus on quickly is our TRIP Autonomous Vehicle Mobility Challenge. So the TRIP partnership, it's the Transportation Research and Innovation Partnership. And this is a group that we've put together with partners from state and local government, private partners, quasi-governmental organizations, and then higher ed. We are looking to do our first autonomous vehicle pilot project in Providence, Rhode Island. The City of Providence and RIPTA, our public transit agency, are our two primary partners. What this project aims to do is ultimately help state government really assess the both challenges and opportunities that AVs could provide us. Our focus is really on, one, not only testing and advancing the technologies, but really assessing and understanding the opportunities and challenges it may provide our communities, and so keeping the community as the focus. Specifically looking at how these technologies can benefit public transit and expand opportunities within our public transit sector. And a big part of this is the research. So we're looking for whichever vendor or vendors we end up working with. We want them to be on board with us around these different goals we have, but also we're going to be building a research team. So many of you may have gotten an email from me today. We are putting a call out for proposals from researchers to look at a variety of topics: the social behavioral impacts, environmental impacts, the workforce, the human and machine kind of interface challenges and opportunities. So there's a lot that we're looking to explore, and we're hoping to really build a strong team. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the City of Providence and RIPTA are partners. We're also going to be working with the Quonset Development Corporation. That's a quasi-public entity that has our largest industrial business park, and that's where we're going to be doing initial testing of the vehicles. So prior to having the public riding or having actual service being provided, we're going to be doing all-weather testing at Quonset Development Corporation. Next slide. And I think I kind of went through this, but our goals are really to create a safe and accessible environment to do this testing. We're focused on mobility. We're focused on electrification and thinking about how we reduce emissions and congestion in our communities. We want to have a strong emphasis on growing a strong workforce. And we want to think about how to integrate smart city applications into our communities while focusing on privacy and data management, and knowing that there's a lot to dive into there. And as I mentioned, we're looking to really build a strong academic partnership around this whole project. Next slide. So I know we were asked to share some of our lessons learned. I think one of our biggest lessons here is that it is really important to build a vision around this work that serves our constituents. So we're not here to do this just to build AVs for the industry, but we're keeping our focus on what's going to benefit our community and the constituents we serve. And you can see some of the other lessons we've learned as well. So the next slide is to highlight our timeline. We issued the RFP on April 27th. We have a pre-proposal conference next week. And as of now, submissions will be due June 8th. And then we put out a call for researchers actually just today. Those research proposals will be due July 13th. And if anyone on the call is not on our mailing list and is interested in sharing the word about the research that we're looking to do, please feel free to email me. The next slide, I think, has my contact info. Is there another slide? Yeah, so that's my, if you can go back one. So yeah, feel free to email me directly if you're interested in getting more information about the RFP or the call for research proposals, and then our website is there as well. So sorry to go so quickly, but hopefully that gives you a good overview of what we're looking to do.
No, that's great. Thank you, Julia. And I think your bullet point there on challenging procurement status quo, I think that's a theme that's going to be of this work as we go forward. So thank you for that update. So we are going to move to Vermont. So Emily, do you want to give us an update, please?
Yes, and this will be really quick. Thank you, Trish. So, and thank you to I-95 Corridor Coalition for putting this together. I've been learning a lot, and I encourage everybody to look at the description of the workshop that the coalition's put together, because so that all looks like a lot of good information. So I just wanted to share sort of two big things that we're doing. That in January we submitted this report to the Vermont General Assembly. And supposedly we're going to get the slides afterwards. This is a hyperlink, so hopefully this will be, interesting to people. It's a 10-page, with a few appendices, reports, that's talking about what we learned over last year about, Vermont ideas and attitudes related to automated vehicles, and then sort of, getting our legislators on board that, we need to be dealing with this. We need to think about testing, deployment, and what kinds of legislation we need. We're working towards that for next year. The other big thing has been mentioned on a couple of slides that, we're actually chairing the Technical Advisory Committee for the 6-state, 6-month New England Transportation Consortium. I think the New Hampshire slide gave the most details on, cross-border issues among our 6 states. And, this has been hugely eye-opening for me in that, I can picture how AVs would work in rural areas. Many people, that we've been talking with so far are picturing how AVs are working in their more urban locations. So I think it's been good for us to get together as the 6 states and sort of think about what the issues are, cross-border, and what that means, even what cross-border and what our joint issues are. So AECOM is doing this project for us. It has started. We have a couple of deliverables that we got, this week, or Friday. But what we're really working towards is this June 11th workshop before the Connecticut CAV Summit that Eric and Pete mentioned. So June 11th, all 6 states are going to get together, and the idea is to have, operations people from the states, policy folks, the planning folks. I'm a research person, but I'm hoping that we bring a DMV person from Vermont, and we really can all talk about all these issues and what we need to do. The idea being a roadmap of things for the 6 states to be working on going forward. So that's the other big thing I want to talk about. And basically we're trying to stay involved as a small state and learn what we can. Lots of anxieties in Vermont about how many infrastructure changes do we or what do we need for AV standards and this kind of thing. But that's all I want to do. Next slide is my contact info. And thank you for listening. So you guys have a good day.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Emily. Thank you. A lot going on, and I'm thinking that with us being tight on time, we may want to reflect as we get this group together to spend more time on roundtable versus our spotlights, or extend the time. So we may, if you have any thoughts on that, send me or Joanna a message. But let's move on to, or you can put it on the chat pod. So moving on to Pennsylvania. Roger Cohen, can you give us an update of what's going on in your state?
Yeah, good afternoon, and we only have a request, Trish, that next time around we go from south to north. So,
fair enough.
We were asked to give a quick overview on Secretary Leslie Richards' automated vehicle action plan, which was announced at our AV Summit in April, and as well as the plans for a new state-of-the-art testing and training facility at State College at Penn State, and to talk about the summit generally. So I'm going to try and quickly touch on all three things. So advance. So the action plan was really driven by events. Events have overtaken our discussion since we last met in outside Baltimore in December, notably the tragic crash in Tempe, Arizona. We continue to have maintain a balance, try to maintain a proper balance between innovation and safety, with safety being the paramount value. And as we've always had, the existing vehicle code in Pennsylvania allows for automated vehicles at any level as long as there's a human driver ready to take control of the vehicle. And it's on that basis that active testing has occurred in Pittsburgh and southwestern Pennsylvania. We now have at least 5 active testing entities operating in around Pittsburgh. So because of the existing law, we don't have a mechanism for, the legislature has not acted to amend the vehicle code, and we've been operating by policy to try to keep up with developments in the industry as it happens on the ground in Pennsylvania while we're waiting for pending legislative action. And one of the things we did 2 years ago, many of you know, is we convened a multi-sector stakeholder task force to develop testing policies for safety with the vision of a shared responsibility between public and private, between all levels of government and the testing entities, the OEMs, et cetera. And the action plan is now what we've announced in the wake of these recent tragic events was we're reviewing and updating those testing policies from 2016. We're going to be meeting with the testers at the end of this month, and then we're going to reconvene our task force and get feedback to make sure that our new provisions are working for all parties. And while we are unable under the law to impose through force of law compliance with those testing policies, we made it clear to all of the testers that it is our expectation that there will be voluntary compliance. So this is a process that we are innovating as we go along, and we're working and collaborating with our partners. So far, the response and the feedback has been very positive, so stay tuned. Advance, please. These are the key points of the action plan. As I said, we're voluntary compliance, updating, and we're still calling on and working with the General Assembly. In fact, we have a call with them tomorrow to ensure that the appropriate legislation is put in place. Advance, please. And we're also calling for the creation of an independent safety validation mechanism. One of the reasons I asked the question about procurement is because we're trying to invent something here, and again, the ability to actually go out and find that service, much less contract for it within our existing procurement structure, is very challenging indeed. We're also asking other DOTs and agencies to call on US DOT and NHTSA to make their guidance for 2.0 Vision for Safety, particularly the 12-point safety checklist, now voluntary, make it mandatory. And at the AASHTO meeting next week, Secretary Richards will be circulating a draft letter, so you're encouraged to alert all of your principals to seek her out and sign on for that. Advance, please. So the summit was got a little out of order. The summit was in Pittsburgh in April. You see Secretary Richards with Chris Urmson, the founder and CEO of Aurora and one of the pioneers in this space. And on the right, Mayor Bill Peduto, and on the bottom, a very exciting discussion of 4 economists. The themes of the summit were threefold. It was safety, infrastructure planning, and workforce and economic development. And we had our first summit in last September in State College, and we decided, because of the excitement and enthusiasm of that, to not wait a full year. So we brought it to Pittsburgh, which, because of Carnegie Mellon's presence and its offshoots, is really ground zero for AV technology. And over 400 people came to the event. We made news with the announcement of the safety action plan, as well as the Penn Start testing facility, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But just a couple of takeaways was that there's a lot of concern about the rural-urban opportunity gap, and that's broadly in technology, but it's particular in the advent of this new transportation technology, and there's a lot of sensitivity about how to equitably deliver the opportunities and benefits. There's a lot of reticence in the transit community about forthrightly engaging in this, in what this technology means for transit, even while it may on many levels threaten traditional transit models. But there's a lot of concern about workforce impacts in the transit community that causes that reticence. Notwithstanding that, we had a speaker from the AFL-CIO, a senior member of the AFL-CIO executive team, who says that, at least at the front office, the union believes that AV technology is going to be a very strong force for new, better, and greater work and job creation opportunities. So they're bullish on this. The last 2 points is that there's a difference between testing safety and deployment safety, and Tempe illustrates that. The technology is not mature. It is not safe. So we need to test it, but we need to establish protocols for testing safety. We're going to, if we can get to that point, we can start to safely advance the technology such that we can think about what safe deployment looks like. And the last point I would say is that there was not sufficient emphasis, and we want to correct this in future discussions, on connectivity relative to autonomy. Autonomy obviously is the shiny new thing. We're all fascinated by it, but it's the connectivity that the public sector can deliver that's going to provide perhaps that extra margin of safety that's really going to advance the technology and perhaps can overcome some of that public skepticism and anxiety about what this technology means for safety. So let's move on, please. And again, just keep going through. I just did all my talk without advancing the slides. So that's the Penn Start training facility. It's a joint effort of PennDOT, of the Turnpike, and Penn State's Larson Institute. It's going to be a world-class advanced technology testing facility for CAV, for ITS, transit, commercial vehicles, work zone tolling, and incident management. There's an existing test track up at State College at Penn State. This oval is going to be approximately twice the size. It's going to have a straightaway where you can hit 70 miles an hour with tolling gantries. We're going to have an infield with configurable alignments so that we can make changes, and as well as training facilities. You can see a flyover simulation of the facility at the website pennstart.org, and I think that's all I have. It is.
Great, thank you, Roger. I think we know where we're going to have our next I-95 Connected Automated Vehicle event. We may not wait that long, but it was exciting developments. And I will promise to go south to north next time, but I appreciate Kevin, you sticking on. If you could give an update from Maryland, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Recognizing the time is short, I'm going to dive right in. Maryland's efforts are focused on a highly cooperative, open, and transparent program to incorporate ideas and feedback from all of our stakeholders so that we make sure that our innovators and the drivers of new technologies have a seat at the table with policymakers, law enforcement, and other public sector decision makers. Maryland's Connected and Automated Vehicle Working Group conducts well-attended quarterly meetings with regular presentations from a number of very diverse groups like the higher education community, private sector interests, organizations representing individuals with disabilities, etc. We've got some subgroups established to address, to have a more laser-like focus on some key issues, law enforcement, freight, research and development, etc. And since the Maryland Department of Transportation kind of uniquely incorporates all modes of transportation under one umbrella, it serves as an ideal focal point so that those interested in participating know exactly where to go for information. The group is responsible for capturing expressions of interest and issuing testing permits. We've also recently put online an interactive map of our CAV testing sites. We'll go to the next slide. In terms of best practices, Maryland is absolutely convinced that having everyone at the table to solicit perspectives and interests has been the key to our success so far. It's allowed us to initiate pilot programs to evaluate a number of different technologies. And another element that we've been focused on is the public education campaign. The group has actually assembled and put together 2 separate flyers. You can see links to that in the presentation to give the general public an idea of what it is that's going on, what it means for them, and how it might impact them. We're also very pleased to announce that on the 3rd of April, we launched the Maryland Transportation Institute, which is with the University of Maryland College Park, a research and education institute. Newly formed collaborative partnership, which again expands and enhances our capabilities relative to CIV evolution. It'll give us the opportunity to do additional research analysis and evaluation of best practices nationwide. In terms of strategic planning, the MDOT strategic CAV strategic plan is currently under development. Our State Highway Administration has issued a strategic plan, and MDTA and our fellow transportation modes are still conducting planning efforts for the CAV issue. Those will always be living documents because the technology is ever and quick changing. In terms of specific pilot programs, MDTA has a DSRC pilot to evaluate the number and universe of vehicles that are currently communicating, and MDOT, State Highway Administration, has a US1 Innovative Technology Deployment Corridor, which includes 20 intersections, broadcasting, signal phasing, and timing information as part of AASHTO's SPAT challenge. Going to the next slide. There we go. So one of our next efforts is the development of CAV video clips to continue our public education efforts. In addition, we're looking for CAV partnering opportunities, talking about issues of freight platooning in particular, largely as a result of the fact that our partner agencies, Port of Baltimore and the Maryland Aviation Administration, obviously are highly dependent on freight, and that gives us a unique opportunity to head up that effort. Our freight subgroup is looking for opportunities to collaborate with both the I-95 Corridor Coalition members on regional pilots, and Nanette Sheikey, who I know is on the call today, and Louis Campion at the Maryland Motor Truck Administration are both anxious to talk to potential partners about that process. We've got very active participation throughout the Department of Transportation and all of our business units. We're very active in national, state, and local projects. For example, Maryland Transportation Authority, where I come from, is heavily involved with the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, who have very active communities of interest regarding CAV development. And jumping to the last slide, I simply share contact information both for myself and for Chrissy Nizer, my colleague at the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, both the MVA administrator and the chair and lead of our working group. We look forward to working with each of you as we move into the future together. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I have to say, I am just so impressed with each of you and what you're doing at your state. There's a reason why we're going over time, is there is just so much activity, and I appreciate people taking the time today to go over what's going on. So we have 2 more updates. I encourage folks to stay on, but again, we'll make sure we share these slides, and as we plan these in the future, we'll make sure we put more time into this roundtable, because I think this is critical, because everything is moving so fast for us to keep each other abreast of what's going on and sharing these great ideas that are being highlighted today. All right, Kathy, you're on.
Okay, so I didn't send in slides, but I will send some so that they can go out with the others. But I'll go really quick through some things we've done since December. We have upgraded the DSRC units at all of our locations in our test corridor in Northern Virginia, which includes 30 signalized intersections that are broadcasting SPAT and MAP. We're also in the process of installing an RTK base station to provide enhanced GPS accuracy to enable even more V2I applications, and we're really excited about that. As a result of all the work we've done in Northern Virginia, we are working with 2 private entities that are using the STAT and MAP data, one for vehicle-based applications and one involving a pedestrian application. So more on that to come, but we're excited about the private participation in our networks. I believe when we met in December, Rob Carey mentioned our activities around the Smarter Road Data Portal. So that is out there and is being used, and we're getting some feedback on it. That's really great. We are continuing to refine that portal to both improve the metadata so that the data is actually more useful to folks who come in and grab it, and to develop a more robust framework. So we were a victim of our own success, and we realized that the data asks of the system were actually overloading the system. So we're in the process of updating that framework. But we consider that to be a good thing that folks are coming in and wanting to use that data. Again, back on the connected vehicle side, we are working on a work zone builder application. This really is to improve the data on the agency side of the work zone problem so that then we can push it out to the public. When we first went at it from the public side in terms of providing information, we realized that the data on our side really wasn't robust enough to support what we were trying to do. So we took a step back, and we're working on this application that will allow us to collect in real time work zone data that can be pushed out. We continue to lead the Connected Vehicle Pool Fund Study. Since December, a number of y'all have stepped up to join that pool fund study, and I thank you for that. We are going to shut down the current study and stand up a new one that's purely an administrative issue on our part. FHWA tends to not like these pool fund studies to run forever, so we're just giving this one a new number. But everything else will remain the same. So we're excited to have the new partners, and we thank you for that. On the test track side of things, we're excited to have expanded our Smart Roads testing facility at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. We have a live roadway connector, which allows us to bring test vehicles off of a live roadway and onto the closed test track without that being an obvious maneuver to the drivers or the study participants. That's gotten a lot of use since we opened it in November, and we anticipate that use will only increase. Along with that live roadway connector, we've also opened an urban street network facility, completely reconfigurable with temporary pavement markings and movable buildings that has seen exceptional use since November, and we're really excited about that. This year we're focusing on the construction of a rural roadway, a rural road test track that will allow us to push the boundaries a little bit in terms of the conditions under which we test. So our Smart Road already has all-weather testing capability, but this rural roadway will also provide vertical and horizontal curvature challenges that we don't see on our main test track that's built to interstate standards. So we're very excited about that. We continue to focus, and this I guess goes to the lessons learned, we continue to focus on activities and applications that are really focused on agency goals and measurable in terms of our stated performance goals. So I think someone else said, we're not going after the technology for the technology's sake. We really are doing it because we have very real transportation challenges in Virginia, and we believe the technology can help us address those challenges. And then I think a lesson learned from our work with the data portal is don't be afraid to expose your data. People are going to poke at it. They're going to say, what? But regardless, it's really valuable to gather that feedback, and it allows you to improve internally. So that's all of my update. And again, I'll write this up and send it in so it can go out with the rest of the slides.
Great, Kathy. I appreciate that. All right, so we have our final report out, and then we'll close down. I appreciate folks, majority of folks are being able to stay on. So Eileen, take us home.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll go quickly. So the first slide, just as I think I mentioned at the December meeting, the Association of MPOs has a CAV working group that started up in April of last year. We had 4 meetings, and there's going to be a summit held in the fall of 2018, which will be invitation only, and Trish, you will be getting invited to that. We don't have the details yet, but just keep an eye out on your inbox. Next slide, please. Just put together some highlights of and findings of the discussion from our 4 work group meetings, and I won't go through all the details. I mean, I think the challenges and needs and risks are pretty similar for DOTs as well as MPOs, but we're coming at it from the perspective of, you know, how do we look long term, and even, you know, with our short term plan of 1 to 5 years, that's still long term in CAV. You know, especially like the final bullet, the full range of impacts of emerging technologies. I mean, how do we start to include those in our long-range plans? How do you look 20 years down the road and you know, try and model for that? In terms of risks, an area where we thought MPOs were you know, more unique and focused was the environmental justice and equity standpoint, and also MPOs have you know, a closer linkage to the public sector, so trying to get the message out of for stakeholder expectations of kind of what to expect, help with acceptance of technology and unpredictability, and you know, how do we incorporate these new technologies and unknowns into our long-term planning process. Okay, next slide. So we started to try and identify some strategies, and you know, I won't go through all of them, but you know, one of the things we are trying to identify is, you know, what do we have control over, and then what don't we, and that goes to the drivers, levers, triggers, and tipping points, and just trying to identify, you know, what do we have control over, and what should we be monitoring, so if something happens, then MPOs could say, okay, well, if this happens, then we need to do this. The last bullet on that left column, continue maintaining infrastructure in good condition. You know, a lot of the discussion was about, you know, we still have to continue doing what we've always done, with maintaining the infrastructure in good repair, and you know, regardless of what kind of vehicles are on the roads, if they're not in good repair, you know, then it's not, you know, they won't be safe, and they won't be able to be used by anyone. We want to continue the role of providing our public partners and stakeholders education about CAVs, and provide a place for involvement and engagement. Continue to make investment decisions that support today's needs, and you know, and the goals for the region. You know, it's not, CAVs doesn't mean we're throwing out all of our goals and all of our you know, all the planning that we've done. We still have you know, goals that we want our region to meet, and also just continuing our role of accounting for equity in transportation planning, and making sure that some areas don't get left out. Okay, last slide is the contact information. Here's my contact information. I'm not the chair of the CAV work group. Tom Bamonte from Dallas MPO is the chair, and then if anyone wants his contact information, I can provide it.
And Rachel Roper is one of the AMPO staff that's working on this. And there's a link to the documents that have been developed so far from the work group. That's it.
Great, thanks, Eileen. And we will make sure that we put those documents up on our website, and as well as some of the references that were highlighted in this webinar. So I feel like we all should give each ourselves like a pat on the back. That was serious, amazing updates from up and down the corridor. And we obviously went long because this is just so much going on. So we will put some material together to share with this group, and as we go forward, we'll take a step back with the working group co-chairs to see if we should extend this or configure this sharing across coalition members differently. But